And welcome everyone to this episode of Craze's Corner. I'm joined by
Woohoo!
Will, and we're going to be talking about Dynasty Fantasy Football draft picks today. We're going to talk about whether you're rebuilding, whether you're competing for a championship, what should you be doing with your draft picks, as well as we're going to talk about maybe where some tier fall offs are in this year's draft. So when you're looking at trading for draft picks this year, you know kind of what range you want to be in. Will, you hold the 101 in our Dynasty League. You are a rebuilding team. Are you happy with that to have the 101 in this year's class?
Look, the one thing about the 101 is there ever been a draft that there hasn't been somebody really worthy of the 101? And I think this year you could argue, especially in the Superflex Dynasty, there's probably two or three guys you could consider it the 101. I think there's one clear-cut favorite, but, depending on your league and like in ours where you could play two quarterbacks, Superflex, right? I mean, I think Cam Ward has to be in consideration. And it just depends where you are in your roster. I'm actually okay. I think I'm quarterback for the future, so I don't have the same pressure. But if I was a team that maybe had the 101 but had an aging quarterback like a Stafford, I think you have to have a discussion looking at your roster. What does that look like? And then you have to have the most important discussion is, are you trading back out of that 101? So
yeah, I think for me, Jeanty would have to be 101. Even if you need quarterbacks, I think that I wouldn't personally reach for Ward over Jeanty. I think Genty's going to be your guy for the next little bit. If you're competing, I think Genty's going to be great no matter where he goes. And even if you're rebuilding, he's going to be a great piece to have on your rebuilding team. So for me, he's kind of like his own tier in this upcoming draft. Super flex, not super flex. I think he's definitely the 101. So you are rebuilding.
That's my plan for 101 unless someone makes me an offer I can't refuse.
Yeah, so you are rebuilding. Obviously, last year you did have a lot of draft capital. Is draft capital the way that you like to rebuild your dynasty teams? If you're rebuilding, is that what you're aiming for?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the fun things about dynasty is being okay with the cycles of a franchise, of your franchise, right? Like you build a franchise to win, and if you're lucky, you get that window for maybe 5 or 8 years, and then then it's time to rebuild, and that's okay. And it makes the dynasty interesting, right? That's why I play dynasty, because you want to go through those cycles and test your skill set about can you build when you have to rebuild. So yeah, I like, give me as many first and second round picks as I can have. And that way I can take swings and try to get as many home runs as I can too.
Yeah, I think that draft picks can definitely be risky, and you have to kind of make sure that you've done a little bit of scouting on these guys and you know a little bit what's coming up. I'm in a dynasty league right now that I took over a couple years ago. I have 5 first-round picks this year, so I should be able to help boost my rebuild there. But I do like draft picks. I know there's lots of people that say you don't want draft picks because you can bust. But you can bust, but you can also hit. You can trade draft picks away if you're rebuilding for younger, talented players who have already kind of made it. But then you get into it where younger players who have already made it are expensive. And if you're rebuilding, it's not really where you want to be. As if you are already kind of a championship, a contending team, like I am in our Dynasty League. I don't have my first or second round pick this year. I did trade them away. And I think that's for competing teams. I think you honestly have to trade away your draft picks. You have to get those better guys, trade them away to the rebuilding teams and take their older guys who can put up more points for you now. So I think it honestly just comes down to you looking at your team, and you have to be able to analyze, can I win the championship this year or not? And then you have to go into the season, into the draft, kind of knowing that, like, okay, maybe there's a couple project players who aren't going to compete right away this year. The situation is not exactly ideal. Like we both like this running back class. It's a super deep running back class.
Yeah.
There's going to be running backs that go to terrible situations that nobody wants. But those guys, they may not get that opportunity this year. But in the future, they may get that opportunity. And those are guys, maybe if you're on a rebuilding team, you can put a guy like that on your taxi squad and let him come back into next year. What are your thoughts on the wide receivers at the top of this class between McMillan, Burden, Egbuka? Are you in on any of them right now. They're around 102 for McMillan with Cam Ward, and then Burden and Ibuka are maybe around the 107, 108. Are you in on any of those ADPs?
I think it depends. Honestly, last year's NFL draft kind of set the tone, I think, going forward for fantasy. It's not just players' potential, it's where they get drafted. Mm-hmm. And honestly, look at me at 101. I'm a little concerned about where Jeanty gets drafted. I think hiring Pete Carroll with the Raiders makes me feel a little better. But before Pete Carroll, are you really going to risk 101 on that? So to the wide receivers, I think it just depends where they go. So my gut is that wide receivers go later in the first round in the NFL draft, which is actually more beneficial to fantasy because you're probably going to an established team with an established quarterback. So whoever the Bills draft, if the Bills draft a wide receiver, I got to take that seriously, right? But if one of these wide receivers was going early first round, based on looking at the teams and their quarterback play, I'm not necessarily. That makes me a nervous wreck.
Yeah, I think Tet could go within that top 10, whether he goes somewhere like Carolina or another team, that needs a wide receiver one. I think he could go there. But it does kind of depend on the landing spots. You definitely want to have a guy who's paired with a good quarterback. It makes it easier. I'm in on the wide receivers if they go to the right spot. We also have a couple more running backs going in the first round with Hampton at the 104 and Henderson at the 105. To me, the running backs, like I said, it depends. If you're rebuilding, you can take your shots on these guys no matter where they go. But if you're not rebuilding and you're trying to win now, these guys could end up on some bad situations behind great backs. You could see something like Seattle did with Charbonnet or Braylon Allen last year behind Breece Hall. Like those guys aren't getting the workload that they could have, and they could succeed when they get the workload. But to me, it depends. And then you're looking at the quarterbacks, which I'm not fully sold on. I like Ward, and he would be the quarterback out of anyone that I'd be drafting. But I'm not sold on Sanders. And then Tyler Warren. Do you think Tyler Warren's worth – right now his ADP is the 106. Do you think he's worth a mid-first-round pick?
No. I think he's late first round.
Yeah, that's kind of where I have him.
Right.
So for what Will and I just decided is that the 101 is going to be good value, maybe the 102 with Cam Ward, and then after that it really depends on where these guys end up.
Well, like you said, if Carolina picks a wide receiver, and I think we all know who that is.
Yeah.
Is that not the 103?
It could be the 102.
Right, it could be the 102. You're absolutely right. And honestly,
Ward is locked in.
So the question is, and I'm gonna ask this. I got the one for me, for example. I got the 101. But if I could get 2 firsts in a running back heavy draft, I think owners have to at least consider it based on, of course, this is all speculation until we see the NFL draft. But if a couple of running backs go to established teams, is there a big difference between Jeanty and them?
Yeah, if like Hampton goes to somewhere where he's got a really good opportunity, and Jeanty goes somewhere where maybe he's not, and he's got to split time with somebody. I could see
I saw one mock with the 49ers taking Jeanty.
That'd be crazy.
Right? But after watching last year's NFL draft,
it could happen. Yeah, I think for me, I don't think I'd move off the 101 until we see where he lands.
Yeah.
Because I think Jeanty is just that talented where you're going to want to have him on your team. Is there anyone looking maybe closer to the end of the first, second round as a guy that maybe kind of stands out to you? Are you in at all on like Travis Hunter or Jalen Milroe? Or are you just kind of looking at where these running backs are going to go?
Pre-combine, it would have been Hampton.
Yeah.
And now, if he gets past 105, 106 in a dynasty draft, But if you were looking at mock Superflex Dynasty drafts a couple weeks ago, Hampton was a second-round pick or late first.
Mm. Yeah, he's now the 104.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to me, I think there's definitely a drop-off after you get past, kind of the top running backs, quarterback, wide receiver. But I do think that you can get some value. I'm not in love with the early second-round picks, but I do think you can get some better value near the end of the second round when you start getting to like Dylan Sampson, Ollie Gordon, Isaiah Bond, and those guys, as opposed to Travis Hunter going right now around the beginning of the second round, and I'm not in on that ADP.
Yeah.
Jackson Dart.
I saw somebody say that Travis Hunter is more than likely to play maybe 10% of the snaps as wide receiver in a game.
He'll be a better version of Jamal Agnew, and that's about it for fantasy. I don't know if he's even worth maybe a late fourth, but I wouldn't.
Right? Do you think he'll get overdrafted though?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I think he's a second round pick, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, right now, I just ran a mock. He went 201.
Oh no,
I can't.
I have 201, and I can tell you, unless whoever drafts him says they're playing him at wide receiver, then that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen. Whoever spends a high draft pick on him, he's going to play corner. And he'll maybe have some Jamal Agnew type packages. But we just talked about what we think of this year's class. We talked about what you should do with draft picks if you have a rebuilding team or a team that you want to win now. And if you do have a team that's going to win now, or you have a rebuilding team, maybe you want to trade away some guys, you can go watch the next show where we're going to be talking about what do you do with the older guys, the win now type players. How do you capitalize on their value? Or if you're a competing team, what do you give up to get them? So thanks for joining me, Will. And thanks everyone for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed.